Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Defining Endurance. This is host Lexi Miller. Today, joined by Justin Simoni. He is also known as the Long Ranger on social media and kind of an expert in the whole world of self propelled adventure. I'm going to repeat that again, self propelled adventure. Today, we're going to be talking about what it means to make your own adventure and to use human power instead of a vehicle. Justin, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. The pleasure is all
Well, I'm
mine.
super excited to talk to you. You're one of my favorite people to follow on social media, seeing all of your even just daily adventures up here in the Boulder County area. To start, how did you get started in the endurance world?
It's a great question. Part of it is I just grew up around runners. So some of my first memories are just in the morning at breakfast time. My father would come back from his daily run. I remember going to ultra races in the 80s. And at that time, that means you went to a track for 24 hours, you ran around for 6 hours, and then you switched direction and ran around 6 more hours, did that twice, and that was your race. And some guy would just take a count on how many times you went around the track. I also had a sister who was a cross country phenom in college. She had like a 4.0 GPA as well, so they just kept her on for 5 years instead of four, and she was also the first woman to be inducted in their Sports Hall of Fame. So I mean, she was the athlete of the family. I was the last of four, so I was the one that was trying to find their way. Looking at all these inspiring people. Um, and then when I was a kid, I just had a lot of energy, and it was really easy for me to fall into wanting to do everything. So starting in grade school, I started riding bikes like you do. I started actually rock climbing with my local town social services. And then, when I was a teenager, I got really into skateboarding actually, and I really loved the creativity of learning tricks and being a little rebellious. At the time, it wasn't like something that was like little league like it is now. It wasn't in the Olympics, let's say. It was more like what you weren't supposed to do, and your parents were worried that you were going to fall into a gang or something. I don't know. But I just loved it. It was just something creative that my friends and I did. Yeah, and I actually didn't really explore trail running in any big amount until like I was in my 30s. I was really late to going there, but I also rediscovered cycling as an adult, kind of near where I got rid of my car, 15 years ago. Yeah, and that's a whole story in itself. So yeah,
That's amazing, and I think I also was raised by the ultra runners of the '80s, where it was a whole different sport than
oh
we
yeah,
talk about how hard it is to get into things like hard rock and Western State now, and back then it was just kind of like if you had a pulse, you were in that race. So it sounds like you
sure.
were kind of in the your parents were in the beginnings of that too. So tell you've had some really rad adventures. Tell us some of the most memorable or the ones you might be known for.
Sure. One of the breakout adventures I've done is something I called the Tour 14er. Now I live in Colorado, and one of the things you have to, I think, do to get your Colorado card is climb the 14ers, summit the 14ers. And they're 58 mountains. They're over 14,000 feet, and it's a list, and I guess people like me love lists. And I started doing them with my girlfriend at the time, and it was really fun. We went really slow. We're just normal people doing it. And I just, like a lot of people, I got hooked. I was like, I want to do them all. But I didn't own a car. And I was like, well, I'm not going to buy a car to do this. Is there a way I can do it without using a car? So I was inspired enough to do my research. And you can find little stories here and there throughout the years of people doing it. But it was like 12 people total for the entire, span of history kind of thing. The first time anyone ever done it was around 1985. It was the Dunmire brothers, Peter and Glenn Dunmire, and they did it in like 90 days. And I was like, that is incredible. That is an adventure to just have like these, mountain bikes from 1985 have no bait on what you're doing. Just make it happen. And Pete Glenn, doing further research, they're amazing mountain athletes in their own way. And I was like, when I was doing my research, I was actually on Bill Wright's website, his old website. I know he was a guest of yours, and he had an email he got from some guy who did it in 1997, sort of self-supported. He did it in 37 days. I was like, wow, that's a third of the time that Pete and Glenn did it. I'm like, okay, now this is interesting where, I want to do it too, but I also want to be able to do it the fastest ever. And I'm like, 37 days sounds like a good time to hit. Like, I think I can do it under, but just barely. Because if you do the math, you're like, okay, that's like almost two 14ers a day. Plus you're riding to those trailheads. I'm like, all right, well, this is rad. And sure enough, like I moved to Boulder. This really happened. I moved to Boulder. I found a place to live for about $250 a month. It was a house's mudroom. It was big enough where I could span my arms to hit the sides of the walls, all four corners, and I just had like a camping pad in one corner, books in the other, and clothes in the other. And like that was my life for 8 months. And I just lived like a monk and just trained my little butt off to like be able to uh, do this project. And the project was to ride my bike to the trailheads, then some of the 14ers in less than the 37 days. So it was an interesting 8 months.
For sure. So, and I think like the other thing people maybe who don't live in Colorado need to understand, it's not like these mountains are all in the same place. Like it's not like you're biking like, you have that one initial long ride and then you're kind of just biking 10
Yeah.
miles in between. Like they're in all corners of the state. There's different ranges. So, explain a
Mhm.
little bit of like the problem solving you had to do there, like the creativity of making that work.
Sure. Well, while I was actually training to do this, so I found myself being a multi-sport athlete all of a sudden where I was going to the climbing gym, I was riding my bikes, and I was learning how to trail run basically because I need all three to do something like this. When I wasn't doing that, and sometimes I worked, I'm not sure how that worked out, but sometimes it worked, but it was mostly a lot of planning where I'm like, okay, there's two types of routes I have to figure out. There's the cycling route, right, to get to one trailhead to the other, and then find where I can resupply food and things like that. And then there's like, okay, what's the route I can, do my hike or my run up? So there was a lot of like just combing the internet, reading books, going to the library, figuring out how to put these things together. And what was really cool is like there wasn't much of a map to follow because the thing I read on Bill Wright's site was a one-page email he had gotten from this guy, and the what I knew from Pete and Glenn Dunmire's trip from all the way in 1985 was like a page in a newspaper from the Aspen Times, and it's really inspiring. And I because it's such a blank canvas, I could make it any way I want. So I had a lot of experience with long distance cycling. By that time I crossed the country 3 times, so that was my strength for sure. But like doing all these link ups to these hikes, doing multiple mountains at once, like at that point, I have to admit I had done 9 of the 58 14ers. So I was going in pretty blind of like what exactly I was going into. But yeah, that's really exciting knowing that like I'm going to come up with so many unknowns, right? And have to deal with it. So say when you're planning the cycling route, you have to get to where you are to where you're going. You have to pick a trailhead. You can lock your bike up, find some food along the way, and you have to know where to camp for the night, basically. So those are your main things. And you have to do that every single time. And basically that's what I did. And I would just piecemeal a map together, going like, say, I started in Golden at the American Mountaineering Center, and the first peak is Pikes Peak, which is clearly 100 miles away. So I left at like 4 and 5 in the morning and like rode that 100 miles, and I would pick a route that was quiet, usually off road, not a lot of traffic, something I'd be comfortable doing at night. It wasn't as dangerous as being on a highway or something. And then pick a trailhead that I knew I could get up to the peak, get back kind of quickly, and then be in a great position to get to the next trailhead. So a lot of the trailheads I picked were not the standard routes, just because they worked better for doing these massive link ups.
Oh, for sure. Like there has to be
Yeah,
so like just like again looking at the map in my head, I'm trying to think like okay, you go from Pikes Peak, I'm guessing down to the Sangres, but then you have to get over to the San Juans,
yeah,
and there's a lot
yep,
of interstate travel along that way because they're mostly kind of near more rural towns in Colorado, so it's not like you're easily just hitting the Highway 36 bike path and cruising along. Like
no,
there's
yeah,
a lot of creativity there, a lot of like kind of ranch
yep,
roads and places that might not
yep.
necessarily be safe to be cycling or camping. Um, how much sleep were you getting on an average night doing this?
Oh my gosh, so that's a great question. So before I had done something like the Tour 14er, I'd done the Tour Divide twice. And the Tour Divide is a self-powered, self-supported mountain bike race. Starts in Banff, Alberta, and ends on the Mexican-New Mexico border. So I was used to being self-supported, self-powered, going on these lonely, dusty gravel roads and just hitting up these very tiny towns to get resupply. So I was kind of used to, how to be in that mindset of like, okay, there's going to be these long stretches. Um, yeah, what was your question? I'm so
No, you're fine. So
sorry.
yeah, how much are you resting in between? Like, are you taking days off? Are you
Oh,
getting
okay,
like full
resting.
nights of
Yeah.
sleep?
So correct. Okay. So during like something like the Tour Divide, I would try to get minimum sleep, so like 4 hours max. And I was able to just keep chugging along. It took a little bit of time to get warmed up in the morning, like hours to feel like yourself again. And I was thinking, I'm like, okay, this trip that's like mine, but has basically the same rules, the same framework of how you do a day-to-day activity is going to be the same. So I'm like, yeah, 4 hours is fine. And it was nothing like that. Like say you're a triathlete and you do a brick workout where you're like, okay, I'll run and then I'll ride my bike, and that's called a brick workout because your legs feel like bricks afterwards. That was me every day. So, oh my gosh, my legs killed. They were so trashed every single day. I thought honestly that like, okay, great, the cycling is going to be a perfect way to re-energize the legs after like a really hard run, but it just did not work out that way. The cycling route is for this thing is incredible. Like there's just every day is like a classic day, but to me that means hills. So you have to go up and over other mountain ranges to get to the mountains you want to. Oh my gosh, it was a big challenge. It was a super challenge physically for sure.
I
But I mean,
No, I was just
yeah,
gonna say I can only imagine like it's kind of like the most wild
yeah.
side of a triathlon.
Oh,
Uh,
totally. But like what you find out, like you kind of get into a groove. You find out what the new normal is, and you figure out where your body is able to do it each day, and like you're just there. You're just in that gear, and it's usually like one gear, kind of slow.
and so since then you have done this with the top 100 peaks in Colorado as well, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So I had so much fun. Like it was like life-changing fun, like it's the same kind of experience you get like hiking the AT or doing the Triple Crown or whatever your thing is. I kind of wanted to do it again. But I don't always like to repeat myself. Like I could have gone for a faster time because like you get out there and you're like, oh, I made all these mistakes and I know how to go faster and I know a better way and be more optimized and all this stuff. But I'm also like, I did it. Like I'm cool with it. I'm really happy with how it came out. So I'm like, oh, okay, what else can I do? I'm like, there's another list in Colorado called the Centennials. And what that is the top 100, and actually 105 for strange reasons, highest peaks in Colorado. And I'm like, okay, I can do that instead. It's twice as many mountains, so it's going to take twice as much time. And you go to new areas and stuff. The cycling was actually pretty similar, the route, just because these peaks, when they get larger, they kind of clump together. They're still all over the state, but they're kind of in the same general area. But the hiking part that the was much different. So instead of doing like long days, I had to link up multiple days on my feet and do it that way to be efficient. Just because it takes so much time to ride to these individual trailheads and go up one mountain and then go like 20 miles to another one, go up the mountain down. It's much easier just to link the two mountains together, when it's like 5 miles apart by foot. So I got into basically what's called fast packing, where you do backpacking very quickly. It's like the weird in between, running, trail running, and backpacking. So I kind of learned how to do that, and I mean that was also like I had some of those days where I'm like, this day will never be topped. This is it. I found it. I'm like, this is amazing flow state. Or like you do a multi-day thing on foot, and you're just like, I can't believe that worked. Everything went to plan. That was incredible. I'm going to eat 5 hamburgers once I get to town because that's what I need right now. Things like
Yeah.
that.
So
So
when you're
yeah,
doing these
it
like
just
40 to 60-day long adventures, you're constantly going, you're sleeping minimally. How do you prevent that burnout?
I think the big thing is I want to be there. I'm like having so much fun, and like look at the atmosphere I'm in. I'm in like one of the most beautiful parts of the country. And like if you're feeling down, like that sun comes up, and like all of a sudden like you are re-energized just from like just beautiful seeing mountains and the sun rising and birds chirping and like all the little things. Like it's never a dull moment for sure, and that's enough to get me pretty psyched. I'm pretty good at self motivation if I really want something. So ah,
Yeah, no, it
I
sounds like you just
work.
seem very enthusiastic about this. Like this is
Yeah,
truly like
yeah,
you're living the life you want to lead. Like that's
yeah,
incredible, and that
sure,
usually keeps the enthusiasm high. So,
sure,
kind of tell us a little bit
sure.
about like the creativity and picking out a new project. How do you decide what's next?
Oh, sure. So, I mean, my background, my school background is actually in art. I hold a painting and drawing degree, so I kind of, let's see, yeah, I approach all these projects as if it's an art project, like I'm putting on a show. So I go, what am I inspired? What do I want to do? How do I do it? Like, what skills do I need? What kind of fitness do I have to put up? Like, I love drawing, so I love drawing on maps, and I love looking at those elevation profiles and just imagining what the experience will be like. And that gets me so inspired that whatever I have to do for the training, it just seems so natural for sure. So like something like the Tour 14er, just to use it as an example, I mean, it's such a big project and I was going in so blind on what to do. Like some days were just hard to go to sleep because I'm like, I mean, what's this day going to be like? I'm like really I'm a little nervous about going up this mountain, all those little things. Like I just let myself feel that, all that nervous energy. And then, you just have to perform, just like how you do if you're like putting on like a musical or a play, or like I used to be in a performance art group, like on tour nationally. Like, what's that going to be like? It's the same energy. And for some reason, I'm just really comfortable, and I'm not sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a thing, like being by myself alone rather than doing something in a large group like a team. So being alone, I'm kind of in a happy space. I do need my time just by myself, so that's where I get it.
Oh yeah, I imagine that is a lot of solitude. Though it's probably also is a nice mix
It's
with the mountains because they are so incredibly popular in Colorado that I'm sure as you're doing the
yeah,
14ers, you're not really alone a ton. You're kind of running into people constantly and can interact when you want.
sure. You totally have some variety because sometimes I'm on that top of that mountain at a very bizarre time of day, like 2 a.m. And I will get a very popular 14er by myself. Like I did like Grayson Torreys alone, or like, but sometimes you hit like the most easy, you'll hit Mount Sherman, which is one of the easiest 14ers on a Sunday afternoon. And you kind of go into, you're like, well, it's Sunday afternoon. Like I look forward to petting everyone's dogs. Like this is going to be great as well. Like you have to indulge yourself in what the experience is going to be like in front of you rather than trying to make the experience something it's not. So yeah, you get to You bump into people you know. You're like, oh hey, how's it going? Yeah, I'm on my thing. Yeah, this is the thing I talked about. I'm doing it, and it's cool to just see people happen
Yeah,
to
that's incredible. So
for
one thing I
sure.
really liked from your website is you said that you put involvement over spectatorship. So kind of looking at your adventures instead of running big races. And I think especially during lockdown and the pandemic, more people had to go from racing, signing up for their ultras or marathons to doing creative things like you do. Can you talk a little bit about how you can feel that inspiration or that drive without a race?
Oh sure. Like that idea of involvement over spectatorship is again something that I've borrowed from like the art world. Like that's like Burning Man's whole thing is like, you go to Burning Man, you're gonna be Burning Man. Like you're not sitting down watching people being weird and crazy. You are that person. And when I was in like a performance group, we would go and play venues, but we would never be on the stage. We would be in the pit area with the people. So there was no boundary between performance and spectatorship. Like if you weren't dancing, we weren't doing our job right, kind of thing. Yeah, so like what I can do at least like online rather than do a race or something is teach. Like be like, oh hey, here's what how I do the thing I do. Let me inspire you now. Like here's the project I did. Here's the food I brought. Here's what I was thinking. Here are the hard parts. Here's where I slept. Just like a very, very light framework. But what I'd like people to do then is make it their own, right? Like I don't like chasing people's times really, but I get inspired by what people do. And usually I'll think of what they're doing as awesome, but I also want to do it my own way, whatever that means. And I want to have the license to do that, and also have people be able to have that as well. Like take it, remix it, make it your own, have fun. Like that's what's cool about any of these projects or like trips. Like you can hike the AT or the CDT or whatever, and no one has the same trip, right? Everyone has their own experience, and that's what's cool about it. Again, that's like again something I like borrowed from just my time as an artist, where you look at a painting or you go to a performance and everyone's having a different experience, and whose experience is valid? Well, they all are. That's great. That's freaking fantastic. So I really held on to that idea. So yeah, like I'd rather what people get inspired and do their own thing. So like during like the lockdown, the pandemic, it was a lot, it just seemed a lot more natural to be able, like, okay, I'm going to have to do this thing by myself or on my own, or there's no races, so I'm going to have to look at a map myself and be like, where am I going to go? Like, what do I love to do, and what will allow me to do that? So yeah.
So do you have a lot of people reaching out to you with advice on doing their own big adventures, or do you feel as though, it's still kind of not quite the mainstream?
Oh, that's a great question. Like the things I do are a little bit on the tough side, the extreme side. So I do like to hear when people are like, I'd love to do this, and like I do a little bit of vetting. But again, I do enjoy people just having the freedom to go for it, because I've done that a million times too. So like, but I try to, you know, nudge them the right way. But usually I'm like, you've got this. If I could do it, you can do it, kind of thing. And I get really excited when people go for things. Last year, was it last year? Yeah, during kind of the pandemic kind of area, I did a trip. It was a 3 or 4 day fast pack along the ridge of the Continental Divide, right outside my house in Boulder. So we're talking, it starts in Rocky Mountain National Park on Milner Pass, and then goes all the way to Berthoud Pass, which is kind of near I-70. But it's the skyline. It's the skyline you see when you go up the local hill, Green Mountain. You're like, wow, what a beautiful view. Well, I mean, you look at that, and I can't help but being like, well, I want to be on every single mountain that I can see, in basically in a span of 3 days, and you just have to go for it. Well, what's funny is like, I doing my research and talking to people like Buzz Burrell or Bill Briggs, the old, the old people that started all this kind of stuff near me. is like no one had done it. And it just seemed weird to me, like why, that's the most obvious thing, why hasn't anyone done it? So I had to do it. Unbeknownst to me, other people were like, oh, I want to do it too. And we just never talked to each other because, we're all in lockdown or whatever. And what was really funny was by the end of last year, I had done it. Somehow I was the first. It was just happenstance, of course. It's roll of the dice. And then 4 other people had finished it like that same year in the span of like a month or two. And it's just so crazy. Like, oh, okay, everyone was thinking of things to do, saw this ridgeline, we're like, that would be a perfect idea. Let's go for it. And we all went for it, like by ourselves.
That is super
I
awesome.
love that.
Yeah, no, I think that was,
Yeah,
again, kind of just like with the pandemic when racing went away, like it was amazing to see people's creativity and kind of starting to plan these adventures.
sure.
So along with that, what advice would you give to someone who is looking into this, and whether it's about safety or how to plan out a route? I'd love to hear your advice for the novice.
Sure. Like when it comes to, I mean, there's a lot of things to cover because I do so many things. But for cycling, if you're really interested in long distance routes, like there's so many now that are kind of established. I think one of my favorites is like the Great Divide mountain bike race, where like you can buy a book to tell you what to do, or you can get a map set, you can get a GPX track. There's tons of communities online that'll help you. So you can have as big or small of an adventure you want. If you need your handheld for a little while, you can, or you can just go off and like on-site it. No one's going to say no or yes to that. But you'll get the feel of what's going on. Like the riding is easy, but there's just a lot of it. And also, kind of closer to me in Colorado, we have the Colorado Trail, which is something you can bike with a variety of wilderness detours. And the riding is much harder, but it's, like you get a little bit more out of it at the end of the day. You just go, wow, that was an incredible climb or incredible downhill, or, the camping's more interesting, things like that. And just, take it slow. Like I did so many like 2 or 3 day or overnight trips just on my own in Colorado. Like, I want to go over here. What's over there? Let's check it out. And those really um, got me set to do much more long distance things. Like there is kind of a saying, like if you can pack and ride for 3 solid days, you could probably pack and ride for 3 solid weeks. It's the same kit. You're bringing the same stuff. You might bring one more battery pack or an extra light or something, but like it's the same thing. Yeah. So like, kind of like when you go fastbacking, it's the same thing where like maybe you just want to do some backpacking, for a little while until you can figure out how to pare down your kit so it's something you can go lightweight and long distance and a little quicker. Yeah. And like, again, like the things I do, like the Tour 14er or the Tour of the Highest 100, I'm just combining the two, right? It's when it comes to gear I need, it's a huge overlap where like when I'm riding to a mountain to hike it, like I need a pair of running shoes, right? Extra, and a pair of running shorts perhaps. And like that's it. That's the only extra gear. So it's not like I'm hauling a whole bunch of stuff. But it took a long time to get to that point, and let's say when it comes to safety, like I'm not sure I'm like the greatest person to ask because I've made all the wrong decisions that you're not supposed to make. And there's this great book I can't stop talking about. I've read it so many times. It's called Lawrence Gonzalez's Deep Survival, and you can pick it up used. It's at every single library, I'm sure. But he postulates his theory is that grave, accidents in the backcountry happen because of a series of cascading bad decisions. So, for example, you go out and you don't really tell anyone what you're doing. That's a big one. You get to the trailhead and you realize you forgot a clutch piece of gear, but you're like, well, I'm sure it'll be fine. Like you forget a headlamp, but you're like, oh, it's not. I'm not going to be out there after dark. It's fine. And then you get lost because you also forgot a map, or you're at the wrong trailhead, and then it becomes night. Right now, you're on a mountain at night, no headlamp, and you're lost. You're probably going to freeze. And like, oh yeah, I didn't bring those clothes because I wasn't going to be out this long. And boom, you have now fallen into a trap of your own making. Now, I read this book right before I just experienced that exact same thing where like I didn't tell anyone, weather moved in, my stuff broke, like I was hungry because the stove didn't light, again and again, cascading problems. And I didn't see it because I was young and dumb, and I was resilient as well. I could bounce right back. But I read that book and I saw myself in this guy's stories, and I was like, oh my god, I really have to rethink and reevaluate how I plan these things, and what I do, and maybe get more fitness or skills, and take up. That's why I took up rock climbing again, where I'm like, I don't want to be in the mountains or in anywhere where I get cliffed out, and then I make a bad decision because I don't know what I'm doing. So yeah, I mean, these are all things that could help you. Fitness, experience doing technical things, knowing how to do navigation, learning how to use your phone as a navigation device, things like that. So they're all things that work for you. And then getting, once you can afford it, if you're young and it's hard to like clobber this stuff together, like investing in really good, really warm gear.
Oh
Sure.
yeah, no, I think especially places like Colorado, or I mean anywhere in the U.S., really weather can blow in like crazy, and
Yeah.
it can change in an instant. So before I let you go, I want to hear: is there any upcoming projects you're working on?
Oh, I have a million. Right now, I've been tapped to write a book. I'm writing a guidebook on the Centennials, and it's just the hiking part, so don't worry.
Good. I want you to follow the biking
It's
directions.
right. It's a book for normal people, not me's, if that makes sense. And I'm really excited to do that. It's been really fun to get out there, and I'm right. I have an art degree, so it's really been fun to work on my landscape photography, and that means a lot of early morning wake up calls to get that perfect alpenglow, light in the middle in the early mornings. I've been enjoying that. I am working on a guidebook on how to bike pack to the 14ers, and again, it's for normal people. It's not for me. So there is a complete guide on how to do it for the front range 14ers, which I think is an excellent introduction to how to do it. And the guidebook is just the ride. The riding and the route is so good that if you don't even hike one of the 14 years, you'll still have a good time doing the route, I think, personally. What else? Right now, I'm saying I'm not, but I probably am. I know when you talked to Bill, he was talking about the Longs
Hmm.
Peak project. And the Longs Peak project is you summit Longs Peak. It's a 14er in Rocky Mountain National Park every month of the year in a row, so 12 times in a row, by a different route. And of course, being me, I've been inspired by Bill Wright. Has been a huge inspiration. He has such a weird, silly website that's full of outdated information, but I've tapped that website so much for my inspiration. The my little way of making it my own is it's now the self-powered long speed project. So instead of starting at the trailhead in Rocky Mountain, my challenges start in Boulder, do the 4 hour ride on bike to the trailhead, do my route, and then ride, the 3 hours back home. And it's proven to be impossible. First off, like I'm not sure if like you've ever thought about like how cold it is at 9,000 feet in
That's
January
what I
on
was
a
gonna say. Is
bicycle at
like,
3 in the
are your
morning.
hands just frozen when you get up? Like, oh,
They used to be. I now use over
okay, yeah.
mitts basically. Yeah, pogies basically, and it's much better. But it's still like I have a beard, and like the condensation accumulates, and I come back to the trailhead with like ice beard. It's just ridiculous. Plus it's a long day. Like I'll be on the mountain for 12 plus hours. Plus there's the 7 hours of cycling if I'm lucky. So we're talking like 19, 20 hour days. And like Bill Wright, he's like, he was talking about how he only had the weekends available for his. I tried it last year. It was like my third time trying. Like I had basically Sundays each month to do it because I worked at night. So I couldn't do it on Saturday because I had to sleep sometime. So I had 4 Sundays a month to try. I got like 3 or 4 months, but man, it's tough. It's tough. There's so many things that can go wrong, and like again, there's the safety margin's not so great, and I love living, so there's just not many risks I'm willing to take. Everything just has to be absolutely perfect. So maybe I'll try this year. I've got 2 months in a row. It's not really that far along, but like, man, once you get like 3 or 4, it feels like you're on a roll. You're like, okay,
I'm sure
let's
it's
do
just making
this.
it through the winter. Like once you get through those tough months, like you know it's in the bank,
Oh
but those are tough months.
again, yeah, again, like I try to do research. I'm like, well, I know a few people have ridden their bike to Long Peak to climb it. I'm like Bill Wright is one, like Stefan Grable, like another hard man here, has done it too. But there's not a lot of people. I think Bill Briggs is one of the people who first did it. But I'm like, who has done it in the wintertime? And I could find nothing. So of course, like I think I did the first, but like I've had people who are like, that's, Justin's doing some weird stuff. Let me try too. And they'll try in the winter and they're like, yep, one and done. That was good. I'm done. I'm fine. We're good. We'll never do that again. That was type 3 plus. And of course I've done it like 11 times myself in the winter. So I must have like a very strange circuitry in my brain, kind of like how like they say Alex Honnold has interesting circuitry where he doesn't feel fear the same way. I just might not feel low levels of pain the same way. It must just be
Yeah,
nice
yeah,
for me.
high stoke to pain ratio. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like I just have the mantra. It's like, well, it beats work.
That is, I think that's always true. Is like on the worst day, you're like, I could be working. Like this
Yeah,
is much better. So I
yeah,
so
sure.
appreciate your time. You're such an enthusiastic, fun person. It's been so fun to hear about your adventures. In our show notes, I will link to your social media and your website. I think it's a great place to kind of get some inspiration if you're feeling like you need some outdoor excitement in your life. Seeing your projects is amazing. Anything else before I let you go on how people can find you?
Yeah, I mean, just look for my name, Justin Simoni, or look for Long Ranger. That's Long. It's a little play on words. Yeah, you'll find me. I'm all over the place.
Awesome. It sounds like you could probably also just, park your car outside of Long's
Yeah.
Peak on a Sunday and probably see you biking your way up
That is,
up the
yeah,
road. Thank you.
yeah. If there's blinky lights and it's 3 in the morning, I'm somewhere near Long Peak. It's me. It's definitely
Perfect.
me.
Well, thank you so much again. We really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks so much. I really appreciate it as well.